Welcome back. We've built the architecture. Now, in Part D, we watch the politics crash into it. Because for all the elegant frameworks, sustainable finance regulation has become intensely political, subject to rollback, backlash, and genuine intellectual challenge. And some of that challenge is surprisingly sophisticated. There's a real argument that the very rules designed to make finance greener could, paradoxically, make the system less stable. Let's work through the debates. The first big development is a striking reversal from Europe, long the champion of tough climate rules. In 2025, the European Union proposed an omnibus package to simplify its own sustainability rulebook, the Reporting Directive CSRD, the Corporate Due Diligence Directive, the Taxonomy, and the Border Mechanism CBAM. What does it do? A so-called stop the clock, delays reporting requirements by around 2 years. The scope of the CSRD shrinks dramatically to firms with more than 1,000 staff and more than 450 million euros in turnover, which exempts a huge number of companies. Listed small and medium enterprises are exempted entirely, and the stated aim is to cut reporting burdens by 25 to 35%. Now, how you read this depends entirely on your perspective, and both readings are sincere. To some, it's sensible simplification. Europe had piled on so much reporting that it was drowning companies in paperwork and hurting competitiveness, so trimming it is overdue. To others, it's a worrying weakening of the rulebook, a retreat under industrial and political pressure from hard-won transparency that will let a lot of climate risk slip back into the shadows. What's undeniable is the direction. Even Europe, the standard bearer, is now pulling back somewhat. The era of ever-tightening rules has, at least for now, paused. If rules are being simplified, enforcement against outright deception has, if anything, intensified. The European supervisors, ESMA, the European Banking Authority, and EIOPA, now treat greenwashing as a formal supervisory priority. Their actions include the fund naming rules we studied in Part 9, close scrutiny of firms' ESG claims, and actual enforcement, the DWS case, with its raids and fines being the landmark example. Why does this matter so much for stability? Because of a line I want you to remember: trust is the scarce resource in sustainable finance. The entire edifice, green bonds, ESG funds, sustainability labels, depends on people believing the claims. If investors conclude that sustainable is just marketing, the whole market loses its meaning and its value. So the supervisor's goal in policing greenwashing isn't merely to punish a few bad actors. It's to keep sustainability claims credible enough that the market can function at all. In a field built so heavily on labels and promises, protecting the integrity of those labels is protecting the market itself. Trust, once lost, is extraordinarily hard to rebuild. Now, the most intellectually fascinating idea in this chapter, and a genuinely uncomfortable one. Could well-meaning ESG regulation actually create systemic risk? Here's the argument, and it's clever. Common rules and common ratings, the SFDR, the taxonomy, Paris-aligned benchmarks, and the fact that everyone relies on the same few ESG data providers, all push investors toward the same assets. Everyone is following the same signals, using the same definitions of green, buying the same approved stocks. And if everyone tilts the same way, portfolios across the whole market become more and more similar, what traders call crowded green trades. Now, why is that dangerous? Because portfolio similarity is a well-known systemic risk channel. Greenwood, Landia, and Thesmar showed, back in 2015, that when many institutions hold overlapping portfolios, a shock to one forces selling that hits all the others. Overlapping holdings spread fire sales through the system. So here's the paradox, and it's a deep one. Regulation designed to make finance greener and safer could, by pushing everyone into the same green assets, actually make the whole system more correlated and therefore more fragile. The very act of coordinating everyone onto sustainability could plant the seeds of a synchronized crash. It's a sobering reminder that in complex systems, well-intentioned interventions can have exactly the opposite effect to the one intended. This chart illustrates the mechanism concretely. Picture many different funds, all of which, following the same rules and ratings, hold a large overlap of the same high ESG stocks. Now imagine a common shock hits sustainable investing, say a political backlash, or a sudden change in sentiment of exactly the kind we saw in Part 9. What happens? Every fund holding those crowded green names wants to sell at once. But they're all trying to sell the same stocks to each other at the same time. So prices crater, which forces yet more selling. And the losses cascade. Correlated selling across the whole set of funds. This is precisely the Greenwood, Landia, and Thesma mechanism, now applied to the green trade. The more successful ESG regulation is at herding everyone into the same sustainable assets, the more vulnerable those assets become to exactly this kind of synchronized, self-reinforcing sell-off. Concentration is the flip side of coordination, and it's a genuine financial stability concern. So is this fear real or just a clever theory? The evidence is mixed, and the debate is live. So let me give you both sides honestly. On the worrying side, there's evidence that institutional investors do herd into highly ESG-rated stocks, amplifying flows and price pressure, and that sustainable fund flows can drive green returns, which then may reverse abruptly when sentiment turns, exactly as we discussed in the investing and asset management chapters. That fits the crowding risk story. But there's a serious counterview, and it's important. Long-horizon ESG investors, the patient, values-driven ones, actually trade less than average, holding through the ups and downs. And investors who trade less could reduce systemic risk, not increase it, by providing stable patient capital that doesn't panic sell. So the very same ESG movement might be destabilizing through crowding or stabilizing through patience, depending on which investors dominate. The honest bottom line, whether ESG regulation stabilizes or destabilizes the financial system, is still an open research question, genuinely unsettled. And I find that a fitting place for this debate because it captures the intellectual humility this whole field demands. We are regulating a system we don't yet fully understand, and we must stay alert to the possibility that our best intentions backfire. Let's recap. The politics have turned. Even the European Union is simplifying its rulebook through the Omnibus package. Simplification to some, rollback to others, while enforcement against greenwashing intensifies because trust is the scarce resource. And a genuinely deep worry has emerged that common ESG rules and ratings herd everyone into the same crowded green trades, which, through the Greenwood, Landia, and Thesma fire sale channel, could make the system more fragile, not less. Whether ESG regulation ultimately stabilizes or destabilizes finance remains unresolved. In the final video, we tackle the most political question of all: should central banks do climate, the transatlantic split, and the outlook? See you there.